Well, let's turn the microphone on. That will probably be a lot more professional sounding if we actually have sound. Hi, I'm Dale Franks. You probably don't know me, and that's okay. You don't have to. I'm just a guy on the internet. However, I have been a YouTube member for a long time, and I have wanted to actually get on and do some YouTube videos. My big problem is that even though I had an audio studio set up here in my office, I didn't really have video capability set up really well. I had all the little bits and pieces, but I'd never actually put them all together. Now I finally have been able to put them all together, and so I can sit around and do some videos. And I wanted to talk about a video that I'm awfully late to. It's a subject that I'm awfully late to, but I wanted to discuss it anyway. A couple of months ago, I picked up Mass Effect Andromeda, and I picked it up having never played any of the original Mass Effect trilogy. I was always kind of a first-person shooter guy, and I enjoyed Call of Duty and Battlefield and Medal of Honor and games like that. And then I had a friend who told me, look, you really owe it to yourself to try a good RPG, and he turned me on to Witcher 3. And not usually a big fantasy guy. I'm not much into elves and magic. I don't find that believable. Perfectly happy with flying starships around faster than the speed of light and transporters and talking to aliens. That's all perfectly logical and reasonable. But elves, magic, fairies, no. That kind of stuff just never cut it with me. But on his recommendation, I said, okay, I'll play Witcher. We'll see how this goes. And lo and behold, I actually found a game that I enjoyed. Even the side quests that are set up in Witcher 3, and this is not a Witcher 3 review, it's just how I kind of sort of backed into RPGs. Even the side quests seemed interesting because they had these side characters, these non-player characters who had issues that you had to help them solve, and so I was able to go and help them solve their little issues, and in the course of that, get some sort of loot. And I played the game not really knowing how an RPG worked. I was kind of used to the more linear storylines of something like Call of Duty, where you just sort of proceed from mission to mission. You know who you're going to go after, you know who you're going to shoot. You shoot them, and then you go to the next mission. And I tried that with Witcher 3, and I got to the last mission, and I got my ass kicked. So I had to go back to an early save point, a fairly early save point actually, and I had to replay a whole bunch of missions. And finally, I got to the end mission after playing all these side missions, basically turning myself into a completionist so that I walked in there and was able to beat the final boss and win The Witcher. Yeah, that was great. And so then Mass Effect Andromeda came out this year. Again, never played the Mass Effect games, so Mass Effect Andromeda was my first playthrough for Mass Effect. There were things I liked about it. I kind of liked the gameplay. I liked the shooting version of it. It's a little difficult getting used to being a third-person shooter rather than a first-person shooter, which is what I usually, for years, is pretty much all I played. I mean, I made some sidetracks into Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, and 4 and 5. And I did Red Dead Redemption. Really enjoyed those games as well, although I'm not sure you can say either Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption are truly RPGs. In any event, I played Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, the things that got everybody upset about Mass Effect Andromeda, things that Mass Effect fans didn't really like, were things that I didn't even notice because I didn't know any of the lore. I didn't know any of the background or the backstories. I never had been Commander Shepard or played Commander Shepard. So something seemed a little bit off to me. And there were things I didn't like, such as Liam. I never went on a mission with Liam if there was any possible way I could help it because the guy was just irritating. He was hateable. Every time he opened his mouth, you wanted to punch the guy. However, I then was looking around on YouTube and seeing some other comments, and people were talking about how horrible it was compared to the original Mass Effect. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to go to Electronic Arts. I'm going to do the backward compatibility with my Xbox One, and I am going to play all of the Mass Effect games. So I went back and started with Mass Effect 1. We've come a long way in 10 years. The gameplay was clunky. The stupid QuickTime events to decode and open a locker were stupid. And I was hooked because I got hooked by these characters and these conversations I was having and my ability to sort of change up what was going on based on my conversation options. I was just hooked. And so I went and immediately played through Mass Effect 1, Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 3. And I was perfectly happy. Now, I knew there were some problems with Mass Effect 3's endings, but having never played the game, any of the games, I didn't really understand what the issue was. And so, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I guess more than that, I guess the end of May, I finished Mass Effect 3, my first playthrough, and I saw the ending. And now I know what everybody hated about the ending. And then I played Dragon Age Inquisition. I went straight from Mass Effect 3, I got Dragon Age Inquisition. And I started playing it. And my intention was to play it all. And I just couldn't play it. So I thought, well, let's go back to Mass Effect Andromeda. That puts me back in the Mass Effect universe. And I went back to Mass Effect Andromeda and started to play it. And I realized that just like Dragon Age Inquisition, I don't care about any of these people. I mean, the ones that I don't actively dislike, like Liam, are people that I just don't care about. If they die, I don't particularly care. I couldn't get invested in the story. And here's the thing, or what I think is the thing. RPG gamers are weird. I don't mean they're weird in the regular nerdy way that people think RPG people or MMO people are weird. You know, your Dungeons and Dragons crowd with their weird haircuts and their wanting to play around with swords and stuff like that. RPG gamers are weird in that they have radically different expectations of what they want out of a game. When you're playing Call of Duty, you know who the bad guy is. And you know that there's going to be this linear progression of missions that you're going to kill various people who are stronger and stronger and stronger. And finally, you know that you're going to confront the bad guy. There's not going to be any character development in your character. Your character is not going to discover some new depths to his personality or character. He's not going to really advance in any way. He's going to be the same guy at the end of the game as he was at the beginning of the game. He's just going to be a guy at the end of the game who's killed somebody who's pissed him off. In an RPG, you do expect to see that character development. You do expect to see your character change over time. The events that they participate in, you expect them to have an effect on your character. Moreover, people who play RPGs really get invested in the lore. If you tell somebody in a codex or just in the narrative of the game that something particular is going to happen, and that this is how this world works, well, guess what? They expect that that's how the world works. Excuse me. Which brings us back to Mass Effect and why Mass Effect ultimately was so unsatisfying because of that ending. For 3 games, Mass Effect has been telling you a narrative about the Reapers. And the narrative about the Reapers is that they are incomprehensible. They come and they do genocidal things every 50,000 years. They wipe out everybody and then retreat back into the intergalactic void. And this is part of a cycle. And whenever you talk to a Reaper, all the way into Mass Effect 3, when you have a conversation with a Reaper directly, but starting in Mass Effect 1, when you talk to the original Reaper Sovereign, they always say, you can't stand up against us. Our victory is inevitable. You can't understand us. Everything we do is so advanced. We're so far beyond you. We're so godlike that everything we do is utterly incomprehensible to you. Okay, now that's an interesting characterization. That's an interesting thing to put in front of the player, to tell them that they have a foe that they can't really comprehend. And so their struggle is not really to comprehend this foe, but to try to figure out some way of beating the foe, find some way that even these advanced godlike AIs don't see coming, which we get with the Crucible, which is literally a deus ex machina, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. So you go through all of these missions, including, if you play as a Paragon, brokering a permanent peace between the Quarians and the Geth, the only AI species that you really have any knowledge of in the Mass Effect universe. There's Edie, your shipboard AI, but she's not really a species, right? She's just one. She's just one AI, a one-off, if you will, some rando AI. The Geth are a culture. They're an actual species. And you broker peace between them and the Quarians. And you do that fairly shortly before you actually go through the final mission in Mass Effect Andromeda. So you've received a narrative about what the relationship between organics and synthetics are. And as a result of this narrative, you now know that it is possible to have peace with these synthetics. In fact, what you learn is that it wasn't the Geth who were the problem at all. It was the Quarians. The Geth were driven to war by the Quarians because the Quarians, basically as they're portrayed all through Mass Effect, with the exception of Tali, who is so huggable, the Quarians are just assholes. That's just the bottom line. They're just a bunch of jerks, and they brought their problems on themselves. And you almost, by the end of Mass Effect 3, think, well, you know, you guys kind of deserved it. But you have to have both the Quarians and the Geth to help you fight the Reapers and to get your war strength up. Your war assets have to be a certain level to get the ending that you want. So, okay, you make peace between them. And so you've learned things about the Reapers and their utter incomprehensibility, and about the relationship between synthetics and organics. You learn all of these things through the narrative. You've been told a story. And then you get to the last 5 minutes of Mass Effect, and basically they just throw away that entire narrative. You meet the godlike, ghostly boy figure who says he's the catalyst, and who some have called Casper the genocidal ghost, and he just tells you, yeah, the reason that we come and we harvest your society, which is to say the reason why we destroy any evidence that you ever existed, is to turn you into a Reaper. How that works, I don't know. How do you harvest someone? How do you transform their essence into a Reaper? Who knows? You subvert the narrative by saying, oh yeah, we're going to come back every 50,000 years, but you've built this Crucible thing, and now my solution will no longer work. And since my solution will no longer work, I'm going to give you a limited list of basically the same solution. You're going to do what we wanted you to do, either by controlling us, destroying us, or synthesizing with us. And you never get a chance to argue with the guy. It's all auto dialogue. You get a chance to ask a couple of questions of Casper, but for the most part, there's no argument. You just accept his choices, and you accept everything he says as true, even though most of what he says is self-evidently untrue in the context of the narrative, because the narrative itself tells you that everything he says about the war between synthetics and organics, that is eternal, that synthetics will always destroy their organic creators, well, that's just not true. The narrative has told you that that's not true, and then Bioware comes along in the last 5 minutes of the game and tells you, forget everything you know about the narrative, forget everything you've learned over the past, in game time, 3 years, in real time for us who are playing the game, 5 years. Forget everything you know about that. We're now going to rewrite the whole story. We're going to introduce a brand new character in the final 10 minutes of the show. We're going to subvert the entire narrative of everything that we've taught you over the past 3 games, including Mass Effect 3, and now we're just going to throw that out the window, and we're going to give you some Deus Ex choices, and you'll just pick them, and they're all bad choices. They're all Hobson's choice, right? That's not what people expect. And they certainly don't expect that all of the lore, all of the narrative, everything that they've been taught, just to be tossed out the window. And one of the things about Mass Effect Andromeda, when we talk about the lore, people know what the lore is supposed to be. People know when you've told them and retold them and reiterated in the codex in 3 games that long-range faster-than-light travel is only available through the mass relays, and that ships have to discharge static electricity, so longer interstellar jumps are impossible with regular FTL. The very opening of Mass Effect Andromeda is, well, none of that's true, because we're going to stay in what has to be FTL to go 2.5 million light years in 634 years. We're going to stay in FTL for 634 years, and I guess it's not going to be a problem at all. So everything that we told you in the first 3 games, we're just going to retcon that. Retroactive continuity. What a wonderful turn of phrase. What it basically means is we've decided what we told you before was inconvenient, so we're just going to change it now. Look, they can do that. It's their game, their prerogative. But it doesn't make you feel good about the game developer when they do that, especially because RPG players are interested in the lore. They're interested in the story. And they expect the story to follow the rules of narrative. They expect it to be logically consistent, and they expect it to have an ending that does what an ending is supposed to do. What you don't do in an ending is introduce a new character in the final scene who subverts the entire plot that you've played for 3 games, comes up with an entirely new plot, and then presents you with a choice to which you can't argue, and then says, okay, it's this or nothing. Now, Bioware did, in the final game, Mass Effect 3, they did come out with a new DLC that gave you another ending where you could refuse. Now, think about this, about that ending in particular. You refused to take either of Casper the Genocidal Ghost's 3 stupid choices. You refuse. Now, Casper has already told you, the fact that you're here, the fact that we're having this conversation, proves to me that the solution that I've created to, for whatever crazy reason, come back and kill everybody every 50,000 years so that other synthetics won't kill them, my solution will no longer work. Okay, fine. So Shepard says, okay, then I'm not going to accept either of the 3 alternatives you've given me. Your solution doesn't work, and your 3 alternatives suck too. So I'm not going to accept them. Well, if you don't accept them, what the catalyst does is say, okay, well, my solution no longer works, but I guess I'm just going to continue doing it anyway, because even though I'm a godlike AI, I can't see that the obvious solution is for me to take my Reapers, go back into the interstellar void, and die. It's just a weird storytelling mechanism. It violates the rules of storytelling, really. It's not a weird mechanism. It's just a violation of storytelling, a violation of narrative, and it's a subversion of everything that you've learned playing the game. So, did they learn their lesson? Well, now we go to Mass Effect Andromeda. And apparently not, because once again they subvert the lore, they ignore everything that's gone before, they start off de novo, and they begin right in the middle of a crisis, which is contrived, and then you finally get into the gameplay, and it becomes really, aside from some good combat, and there are some good missions overall in there, it really becomes a series of fetch quests. It's one of the things that really got me about Dragon Age 2. Okay, this is an RPG, we're supposed to be telling a story, and they turned it into an MMO, where you just have to go and do endless fetch quests and clear out all of these areas and find 20 shards to open a door, which requires hours of climbing up mountains and finding these stupid shards. It's just a grind. And the thing about Mass Effect Andromeda is it's just a grind. You know, the amusing thing, whenever you look at Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda side by side, and you see that not only are their stories are so weak, not only do they subvert the lore, and by the way, Dragon Age Inquisition subverts the lore of the Dragon Age universe, just as Mass Effect Andromeda subverts the lore of the Mass Effect universe. We need content, so I guess we're just going to have an endless bunch of fetch quests, and you're just going to do stuff over and over and over again. And they tout, well, we have these big open worlds that you can wander around in, but why would you want to? Why do I want to drive well, it's not the Mako. It's the Mako without a gun. The Nomad, or Nomad, depending on where you're from and how you pronounce that word. Why am I going to drive that thing around for 30 minutes to drive all across this huge map that is literally a desert? It has nothing in it. Why is that appealing to me? The appeal of an RPG is the story. An open world, as interesting as it might be to explore, assuming that you have enough interesting loot to make the exploration worthwhile. The thing about an RPG is the story. What is my character going to do, and how is my character going to react, and what kind of person am I going to be at the end of this journey? We don't even have that in the Bioware games, neither Dragon Age Inquisition or in Mass Effect Andromeda. You get more skillful, I suppose, so that whenever you shoot somebody or stab somebody, you do so with much more authority and do more damage, but you're still the same person at the end. And one of the reasons this is true is because they got rid of the Paragon renegade morality system that existed in Mass Effect, and they didn't replace it with anything. If there's no morality system, if all of your answers, as they are in Dragon Age and in Mass Effect Andromeda, if all of your answers are the same answer just delivered in increasingly snarky tones, and they don't change the way the conversation goes, then you get no character development. You're not really telling a story, and the whole point of telling a story is to tell about the protagonist's struggle. It's either man against man, man against nature, or man against himself. And ultimately, in Dragon Age and in Mass Effect Andromeda, when you talk about either the Inquisitor or Scott or Sarah Ryder, it's not really a conflict. It's not really man against man, man against himself, or man against nature. I guess in the loosest sense, because there is a villain, the Ket in Mass Effect Andromeda, and Corintheus in Dragon Age Inquisition, I suppose that there is another character that exists in opposition to you. But they're very rarely seen, and they rarely even take any part in the game at all until the very last. So they're not an ongoing protagonist, and you don't grow, and you don't become a different person, and you don't learn new things about yourself through this horrible struggle. What you do is you do the missions. You, in Mass Effect Andromeda, you place your little forward stations, you increase the viability of the planet. Every planet, of course, has this Deus Ex Machina machine on it that magically cures whatever's wrong with the planet, because in Mass Effect, apparently there are ancient civilizations in every galaxy. Our galaxy has the Protheans, or before them the Inosani on Ilos, or you've got the Remnant. There's nothing new there, and there's no story there, and there's no struggle with the protagonist against an antagonist that captivates you and makes you want to play. What's even worse is that the characters are simply worse in both Dragon Age and in Mass Effect Andromeda. You know, say what you will about Mass Effect 3 or Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 2, quite frankly, is a disaster from a storytelling perspective and for moving the narrative forward. The whole thing with the collectors, with Shepard's death and resurrection, I mean, it's just basically nonsensical. But you overlook all of that. And the reason that you overlook all of it is because at least you get these character moments with these characters that are well written, that you really like. So everybody's favorite Gunsel is Garrus Vakarian. Everybody's favorite huggable alien is either Liara or is Tali, one of the two. And you ignore a lot